27. I've got 3 ready to go. Thank you.
This is Clinchfield. I mean this right here before your very eyes is the real Clinchfield Railroad. You can talk all you want about your Copper Creeks and Spiffy Loops, the 2 Rocky Gorges and 6 big rivers, and the succession of tunnels through all those mountains. Yes, you can visit every one of those ravishing glamour shots along this fabled old line, but you won't feel the true pulse of this stoic railroad till you get right here next to the rails in Irwin, Tennessee. Not surprisingly, we are dead center on the Clinchfield route. That course has hardly changed over the past 80 years, and likewise, the heart of that railroad is still right here. Oh, sure, CSX severed some vital family routes with the personnel or job reductions, consolidations, and relocations standard in any corporate merger. They even moved all the dispatching duties to Jacksonville, Florida. Except for the dispatch control panel itself, which, believe it or not, went to a local fishery and museum. And after all those changes, a visitor to this busy railroad yard still gets a sense of Irwin's ongoing charismatic influence. In a minute, we'll take a quick look at Irwin Railroad life, but first I want to give you a rundown on what to look for in this video. We are going to cover the south half of the Clinchfield line, and as often as is practical, we will give you a waypoint and/or a milepost marker to help keep you geographically located and attuned with the enclosed map and waypoint list. You will be seeing a bunch of trains, so keep in mind that Clinchfield is a north-south railroad. Down here, all coal loads head south, and the empties you'll see are running northbound. While our general movement will be southbound towards Spartanburg, there will be times, such as when we're chasing trains up the loops, that we will briefly change directions and head north. Just like in the first tape, our intent herein is to give you a look at how CSX is running things today on what was the old Clinchfield line. Even though the Clinchfield has been gone for 8 years, you'll still see some familiar evidence of the good old days. Then again, there are a few new customers on old industrial spurs and many vacancies on abandoned or at least idle rail sidings. What you won't see are the tracks that have been removed, which, in irony, mark the progress of a modern mega railroad like CSX. A year ago, we heard that CSX was running close to 30 different design schemes on its motive power fleet. Today, however, the number of unique paints is obviously thinning, as at least one of those bright yellow-nosed units is now part of almost every CSX train. In the same fashion, the call for foreign power is way down, and thusly, you'll be seeing far fewer of those colorful Santa Fe leased engines that obliterated the North End last year, and even fewer of CSX's own neglected, time-worn engines. With a little luck, we may even catch up with a few of those brand new, wide-body comfort cab, though not yet air-conditioned, GE 40-8 CWs. You saw these F units closing out our first Clinchfield tape, the Elkhorn City to Irwin video. They were pulling a special for industrial giant Tennessee Eastman, and we'll follow this train throughout our tape all the way to Spartanburg. At the same time, and heading the other way, you'll be seeing this GP40 passenger special en route from Spartanburg to Irwin. CSX ran this pride ride to celebrate the Corbin Division's superlative first-place safety record. Keep in mind that whenever you see this train, it is traveling opposite to the general travel of this tape. One more thing, which already may be obvious to you, is that just like on the north end, the only other big-name active railroad we'll be seeing down here will have those big black thoroughbreds on the front end. However, if we're real lucky, we may catch a brand new short line switching the rails that used to work southern textile mills. For now, let's get going here at Irwin Yard with a quick tour of the plant. This elephant-style string of old GEs is sitting in what was known as Warren Yard, but is now better known as the Rock Creek Lead. The area is used for some storage, but its claim to fame is that it is the only other north end route in or out of Irwin Yard. This train is parked on the main line at Liberty Lumber, a favorite railroad holding spot just north of and across the street from Irwin Yard. Out back, what once was an active lumber and hardware siding is now abandoned and stands in stark contrast to the modern chemical facility next door, which is one of the very few Irwin rail industries. The old depot is abandoned, but the headquarters building is as active now as it ever was. For Irwin train crews, this is home base. For Blue Ridge and Kingsport Subdivision Company officials, it's the home office. As part of CSX's Corbin Division, this building represents division and company-wide leadership in both profits and safety. Recent subdivision territorial increases are proof that the old quick-service short-route railroaders have adapted well to the 1990s. Across from the depot are the old shops and service facilities. Utilizing the shop buildings today is the Corbin Railroad, a private car rebuilder. A little farther south, you'll find a popular watering hole for a swarm of thirsty prime movers. We caught a glimpse or two of the diesel engine service tracks in our tape introduction. Most through trains and virtually all trains originating at Irwin have their engines serviced here. This is a far cry from the good old days of total engine maintenance, but the recent introduction of 45-day inspections foretells of a more robust future for the grease and wrench business here at Irwin. Typically, a through train will tie up on the service tracks or one of several other designated holding areas. The engines will cut off and wind their way over to the gas pumps for several thousand gallons of fuel and other fast services. After the quick turn, the hostler runs the fresh engines back out to their train, in this case a unit coal train left behind at Liberty Lumber. Waiting for a fresh crew, this train will block the main line for another 20 minutes, and it's just another rolling player in Irwin's intermittent headache called gridlock. Just like any city known for its traffic snarls, Irwin Yard occasionally gets a case of gridlock that keeps the railroad and its fans waiting for hours. As the Blue Ridge and Kingsport subdivisions prosper, traffic flow increases such that movement at Irwin Yard becomes even more restricted. Two new service tracks installed late in 1990 provided some relief by opening two more paths through the yard. But through train repairs on these tracks often block the yard even longer, and with ever-increasing time freight traffic and the rushes brought on by sporadic train flows, occasional bouts of gridlock are unavoidable. We've seen southbounds, especially yellow dogs, sit for hours on the Hannum passing siding just north of Irwin, all because, as we've heard on the radio, there's just no place for them. What you are seeing is part of a three-train pass at Hannum, as the second of two southbounds squeezes by to let the northbound out of Irwin. The first southbound already had been waiting for 3 hours, and will wait even longer at Irwin if its engines are due for service. Traffic movement on the south end is similar, except it all happens 10 miles away, through the Nolechucky Gorge at the Poplar Passing siding. It is not unusual to see long waits here, or occasionally even backed up to the Green River and Kona sidings. That waiting crews often run out of time is an unfortunate sign of another Clinchfield catch-22. Do things well and the gridlock will only get worse. The better this old railroad keeps on running trains, the more business CSX will send it. And with more business, Irwin can expect more and heavier gridlock. In a sense, however, this gridlock is a sign of prosperous times and a glowing Dean's List report card for the local railroaders. It's no wonder this town took to naming 3 of its consecutive city streets after the inanimate yet living thing the city and its residents love the most.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to Erwin, Tennessee. My name is Dale Padgett. I'm terminal manager here with CSX Transportation in Erwin. We're part of the Corbin Division, and we're the best of the best when it comes to safety.
During the late 1980s, CSX set an unenviable pace as a low scorer in competition for safest U.S. railroad. Then along came a new president and his drive to run the best railroad anywhere. One mark of an immediate turnaround and an obvious sign of success was the outright winning of coveted safety awards. Not surprisingly, the Corbin Division took top honors for all of CSX, and the old Clinchfield line scored best of all. Let's get things rolling with an Irwin departure and 4 trains on the Through-Girder Bridge at Unica Springs. Once a resort town, this community sits quietly on the south side of the Nolechucky River. This area marks the beginning of the rugged and spectacular Nolichucky Gorge. To this point, our look at CSX operations on the south end of the old Clinchfield line has focused on rails that lie in a Tennessee valley just to the west of the Roan, Iron, and Unica Mountains. From here, we continue southbound on the railroad, but in a generally east-southeast direction, notwithstanding several course reversals en route to the crest of the Blue Ridge Mountains. From Unica Springs, we will follow the Nolichucky River into North Carolina and on to Poplar. At this point, the river changes names to the Tow River, and we will follow it past the likes of Huntdale, Relief, Green Mountain, Tocane, Kona, Boonford, Penland, Spruce Pine, and the Tow River siding. To repair flood damage in the 1940s, this stretch is called Wall Curve for the formidable curving concrete right-of-way that stands virtually unchanged nearly 50 years later. David DeVault's 1960s movies show Clinchfield's one spot traversing this practically inaccessible, all-season, all-weather monument. Except for the wrinkles and dents it received from a few errant hopper cars last July, this bridge at Poplar is a near twin to the through-girder span we saw at Unica Springs. At this point, most southbound engines are in severe groan as they have just passed through a 4-mile stretch of severely undulating 1% grade, which is intertwined about 700 degrees of curvature with several S-turn reversals. The little Huntdale church that gained national magazine notoriety as the subject of an underpublicized night photo session. We missed that one, but we grabbed our own night Huntdale church pictures a few months later. While the highway and railroad are relatively parallel at this point, the train takes an upper-level route for most of the run between Relief and Huntdale. We first began to pace this returning unit coal train south of here at Green Mountain and picked it up again just north of Relief. With a train speed of 25 miles per hour along the Tow River, it was easy to backtrack and twice cross the river to get in front of the train again before it blocked the highway at the Relief Bridge and defect detector. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Clinchfield country. This is living. Mountains, rivers, cats, incredible solitude, and of course, a couple of front porch seats for the evening performance of our favorite American pastime. We had hoped this northbound time freight would sprint right on by the Green Mountain AIM-Co plant. But CSX's plan for a meet with a unit coal train brought that idea to a not-so-screeching halt. Most of the turn in the tunnel, trains at Brushy Creek negotiate a stiff 14-degree curve and almost complete a full course reversal coming out the other side. It's always nice to have a little entertainment while you're whiling away the hours waiting for a train. Here at Forbes, we were just in time for a small fleet of kayakers who were soon thereafter followed by a string of empty hoppers just 50 feet up the north bank of the tow. I stopped here for lunch one Saturday, and it was Tuesday before I could finish my dessert. Found I had some uncommon bonding with these folks, kind of a return to a natural habitat. Anyway, the best thing to do in Loafer's Glory is to mosey around the corner at Cane Creek and on down the hill towards Tocane. We caught this train as we were mid-hill on the road to town. Brick buildings are relatively uncommon in these mountain reaches, but years ago this city was a serious business center, handling commerce for miles around on both sides of the river and running an active trade with the Clinchfield Railroad. While wooden structures and the strong economic times have both been gone for years, this friend of the family railroad and the several brick buildings are as strong now as ever. Let's watch a few of each.
What they do growing up here, come out and climb that bridge. That's so neat.
If you find yourself caught on the wrong side of the river, perhaps one of these swinging cable bridges will help. These kids grew up traversing the river every day on these bridges and obviously find great fun in the undulating rhythms a little jumping and squealing will bring. Make no mistake, any fear about these bridges shouldn't be about their strength. You see, they rarely stop swaying, and because they're so long with hanging support, they create an uneven oscillation, for my gait anyway, as one hurries crossing the river to catch a southbound. If you saw our cab ride video, you heard Mr. Bailey exclaim about the big rock this house sits upon. To my surprise, it turns out that this home belongs to a member of the Alexander NRHS chapter, and he and his wife host the club's annual summer picnic right here on the rock. While the picnicking has been great, the train show, with traffic-stopping Toe River wrecks on picnic days for 2 years in a row, has been somewhat disappointing. So we had to come back to catch this train a few weeks later, here as it slowed for a meet with a wide body. Walk across this old bridge. Once the connector for the Yancey Railroad, this bridge has been out of business for many years. But just 1 year ago, there was a brief reopening of the Yancey for a special excursion out of Michaelville.
Didn't start. It's not wholesome. For a couple days, it kind of like. Let's go down the way. This is Bacchus, B-A-C-C-H-U-S. It wasn't named after the Greek god. There were two switches for a number of mining operations.
Early two-cycle spat engine that it'll run one way, and then you warm it up that way, and then if you want to go the other way on the track, what you do is shut the engine off, and right before it quits the last time, you turn it back on with the magnet the other way, and it fires and runs the other way, runs backwards.
This is all part of Brian Westphere's week-long course called Crossings of the Blue Ridge. Should you opt for this week-long adventure in railroading, one of Brian's treks will take you to Kona, where you too will have an opportunity to chance the old lumber in this double-span truss bridge, just like my first grip, radio operator, and I did to catch this northbound as it approached Kona for a meet. We'll then head down to the river for the subsequent southbound departure. You may have seen or at least heard of the 1991 movie called Frankie and Johnny. Among other things, it's a cozy little love story that ends with Frankie and Johnny both smiling. A happy ending to be sure, but virtually opposite of the real Frankie and Johnny story that happened to take place here near Boonford, North Carolina. You see, it is our Tow River lovers who were made famous in the ballad of Frankie and Johnny. The story goes that Johnny had a habit of not coming home when he promised he would. Because this was in 1831, Frankie knew he wasn't out chasing just one more train. Irritated with this presumed womanizing, Frankie frantically used a hatchet to dismember her snoozing hubby, and then, like so much pulpwood, proceeded to toast his torso in the fireplace. A grisly story to be sure, but the tale is as much a part of local history and folklore as is our fabled railroad. In case you wondered, Frankie was hanged for her dastardly deed and coincidentally was buried not far from the loops on the other side of the Blue Ridge. This wreck just south of Penland happened in mid-1990, but there wasn't a trace 8 months later. This is perhaps my favorite single shooting site on the whole Clinchfield line. The picture is naturally framed, the S-turn flows right down the valley, and the sunlighting is always right. You may have noticed that Jim Wren picked off our video case cover photo right here with this train. I was so excited to jump right in front of my own picture. For more than 40 years, conductors on Clinchfield's number 38 would just now be announcing, next stop, Spruce Pine. Spruce Pine is next. Today, things are a little more subdued as a coal train simply slips between the signals at holdout and enters the confines of this mountain jewel called Spruce Pine. Yes, this is certainly another of my many favorite towns along the Clinchfield. Among a zillion and two great photo opportunities in the Spruce Pine area is this parking lot at a local concrete plant. What's more is the unique road crossing warning system we passed that looks like something lifted off a fire truck. But it must work okay because one of David Duvall's late 1960s movies shows virtually the same light in service then that is used by CSX today.
Spruce Pine's a nice little western mountain town, and it's got a population of about 2,600 people, and it's always cool here. It's peaceful, it's quiet, it's got lots of very interesting things to do and see. Hi there, I'm Lee Boucher.
And I'm Bill Ansley. We run the Richmond Inn, a 7-room bed and breakfast in Spruce Pine.
Spruce Pine is the mineral capital of the world, and it's well known for all the gem mines around here. And if you want to get away from the heat and from the hustle and bustle, you all come on up here to the mountains.
A person hangs out in Spruce Pine long enough, say like on a typical Clinchfield Saturday morning, he or she is bound to see a great mix of traditional American railroading. Of course, things aren't the same as they used to be, but CSX sure manages to pack in the action, and a terrific variety at that. Let's see, that's the local running a short string of cars into town. Irwin's ever-trusty and somewhat legendary derrick cars have made a visit, and I'm sure it's not just a social call. Here's a weed train taking a break. These pretty ballast cars just work on weekdays. We've seen West Coast lumber loads all over the south part of town. Most of these covered hoppers carry out feldspar, perhaps to make Bonami. Unit coal trains rarely stop in these parts. Grain trains too, they just keep on moving. And the military, well, there hasn't been a good war up here in years. That is, other than the little skirmishes over which tree was the namesake's original spruce pine. You're bound to notice that most trains of any gender are relative hotshots. Perhaps most infrequent of all is a spiffy set of varnish. And perhaps easiest of all is to catch a few night shots. CSX has absolutely no compunction about running its moneymakers after the sun goes down. So an evening trip to the Spruce Pine Depot might typically end up with a couple of these.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
just crossed Clinchfield's notorious Bridge of Confusion. The bridge is so known because, in the case of a southbound train approaching the bridge, passengers on the right side could watch the Tow River flowing north, while at the same time the left side passengers saw the same Tow River flowing in a southerly direction. Confused or not, after 45 miles of meandering togetherness, this is where the Clinchfield and CSX part company with the waters of the Tow River. These 3 heavily loaded coal trains each have been directed to the main line for meets with northbound traffic on the Tow River siding. Because this passing siding has 2 paved road crossings, southbound trains generally wait for their meet as far back as the Tow River, while northbounds hold short of the south end of Alta Pass and generally stick out both ends of the Ridge Tunnel. This level siding crosses Alta Pass Highway and winds its way up a steep grade to the Hendredon Furniture Plant. Once the recipient of 6 or 7 cars a day, Clinchfield's only furniture customer virtually does everything by truck today. Southbound trains leaving Tow River siding soon enter Vance Tunnel. As they ease out the other side, they will be in Alta Pass and be near both the Continental Divide and the top of the Blue Ridge. This is Alta Pass. Essentially, we are very near the top of the world as far as Clinchfield was concerned, and this is the highest CSX elevation for hundreds of miles around. The Alta Pass Highway at left connects Spruce Pine with the Blue Ridge Parkway and a dirt road that splits the loops as it descends the other side. You can see the CSX main line to the left, along with 2 side tracks and the Y that used to be so important for bygone pusher operations. The main line will continue southbound out the top of the picture, where it will cross the Continental Divide, crest the Blue Ridge, and shortly thereafter enter Ridge, also called Blue Ridge Tunnel, the 4th longest bore on the line. If there is a benefit to this tape's release being so late, it is that we can bring you the latest news of Clinchfield goings-on. On the other hand, maybe you're not too excited about knowing that there is no longer a Y at Alta Pass. The north switches which connected the Y to the sidings and then to the main line were removed the middle of November 1991. The main line is now one clean streak of ribbon rail with only the south end switch to interrupt the long continuous run of Japanese 132-pound high iron. In truth, good old Alta Pass today is no more than a triple stub-end siding used for parking maintenance of way equipment. While most of the north leg of the old Y still exists and has quite recently been used for storage, it is now, in all practicality, inaccessible. I expected to see someone a little Darth Vader-ish come out of this brand new piece of track equipment, but the only action around here this Sunday was a string of Hotshots like this southbound. ride obviously kept on going, but these other northbounds are stopping here at the south end of Alta Pass to wait for their southbound Tow River meat trains so they can get a little closer to the siding for a quick minimum roadblock meet. This northbound coming out of Ridge Tunnel is just now cresting the mountain. These northbounds are heading downhill on the turn into Alta Pass. They apparently have no meet or a well-timed meet scheduled at Tow River, and then will keep it notched in dynamic brake as they drift downhill with the Tow River for their next probable stop at Kona. From the file of great shots we'll never see again are these late 1970s ridge siding photos from Steve King's book, Clinchfield Country. This first shot features a shifter passing the North Ridge switch, and then a motor car is surrounded by passing trains and a set of pushers. Because maintaining one track on this unstable mountain was difficult enough, and because there just wasn't enough room between tunnels for a standard passing track, the siding was removed so that today only the rusty metal crew shack remains, albeit without any crews. Also seemingly gone forever are clear vision shots from this vantage point on the Blue Ridge Parkway directly over Ridge Tunnel. As the one spot begins its excursion run down the mountain, I want to take a minute to acquaint you with the fabled loops and some of the shots you'll see as we descend the Blue Ridge. Using a modified cab ride map, we'll begin right here at the top of the mountain coming out of Ridge Tunnel. Our first stop will be Little Switzerland for a look at the upper and lower grades. We'll catch a few tunnel shots near Gooseneck and the Washburn tunnels, and then head for one of only 2 public road crossings on the entire loops, at Peppers Creek. As we begin our second reversal, we'll pass the old construction camp number 2 on the left, and then zip through Bob's Gap, a favorite photo locale. Next are a couple of shots at North End Rocky, followed by a little action around Loop Curve. We'll catch a train on both sides of Honeycutt Tunnel, and then move on to the other road crossing at Swafford Road and the Ashford community. There's a super defect detector at Avery, a terrific little school at North Cove, and an online manufacturing facility at Pitts. We'll close out our loops coverage near the bottom of the mountain grade as we traverse the siding at Sevier, a one-of-a-kind siding that works as well for engineers as it does for rail fans. Let's get headed on down the mountain with these CSX southbounds. first of the loop's 6 full course reversals is demonstrated just north of Little Switzerland. From this position, this northbound time freight on the lower line running uphill is separated by just 250 feet laterally and 135 feet below the upper line from where this shot was taken. As the train negotiates the 2.3 miles around Gooseneck, including 5 tunnels, our primary camera remains stationary, but is redirected about 90 degrees to the right for the upper level run. The mechanical advantage of this 1.2% compensated grade is obvious as our heavy 80-car time freight maintains 30 miles per hour all the way up the mountain. hardly 5 hours after this shot was taken, number 7564's time was up, and so was her nose. Cruising along about 35 miles per hour just south of Spartanburg through the Roebuck Block, train 691 ran head-on into a standing empty coal train, and in a matter of microseconds, CSX had $1 million in damages to 2 very wrinkled engines. What about the engine crews? Well, the 8475 crew split for the ditches, but the GE 40-8 crew rode it out, incredibly without significant injury. I went to Spartanburg the following morning, not knowing about the wreck, to shoot tunnel shots with Doug Kuntz, and with nothing else except the wrecker moving, we ended up shooting the wreck scene and some of the cleanup. Interestingly, it was more than a month later when Harry Willis, the last railroader to operate the Kona Depot, advised me that the time freight I had shot on the loops was the same train that had wrecked. Believe it or not, but both engines, yes, even including the mangled SD 40-2, which was already a Morrison-Knudsen rebuild, were eventually hauled out and scheduled for repair and returned to service. Folklore, literature, and photos from around the world are rich with ramblings about the value and meaning of a good wave from a locomotive engineer. Well, here's one for the all-time top 10. Without getting too far ahead of ourselves, I want to give you further evidence of what I mean when I say full reversals when talking about the loops. For all the world, these uniform tracks look like somebody's model railroad, notwithstanding the super wide curves, because the tangent tracks parallel rectangular lines like so many home layouts. That'd be one heck of a piece of plywood. Let's watch a couple trains on loop curve. Just 3 or 4 days, we were treated to at least 4 of these mixed hotshots. I'm sure the folks in the Charlotte NRHS are happy to see their Pine Tree State heading up another CSX Blue Ridge Rambler. James Hawkins took a job, sight unseen, teaching school here in 1950, and never dreamed that a major railroad would run a bevy of challengers right by his doorstep each day. 40 years later, the only thing that has changed at North Cove, besides those absent challengers, is the huge industrial complex named Baxter, or Baxter Travenol, that sprouted up next door. Home to a zillion truck trailers and a healthy share of time freight, this place still has everything delivered in a boxcar of one sort or another. When we get down to Pitts Road, we'll do a little switching, first off 696, and then a half hour later with the local out of Bostic. It's not unusual for a hotshot time freight to drop off a half a dozen or so cars here. Usually the crew just sets them in the Baxter Yard, and later on the local places them where they need to be. Severe Passing Siding is a great place to watch Clinchfield crews work their magic on another non-stop meet. Time after time, train chasers get the benefit of planning and timing as crews and dispatchers work to keep both the sidings and road crossings clear. This is the same time freight we saw make the drop at Baxter. Somehow, a GP38-2 and a good old GP30 got stuck in between a new set of 3 MK SD40-2s. Severe is a rare, totally tangent passing sighting, and as such, engineers can see both end signals at the same time. The benefit for rail fans is similar in that from the old Linville Road crossing, you can look both north and south to read the signals and figure your next move. This bridge over the North Fork of the Catawba River primarily was used to route coal to the American Thread Factory. As Clarence Bailey pointed out in our cab ride video, this relic would be all but forgotten were it not for its carefully planned explosive demolition, which did more damage to the surrounding neighborhood than to the bridge itself. On the other hand, the Catawba River Viaduct over Lake James is another of Clinchfield's picturesque high, long bridges. Easy to get to if you're a fish or a beaver, we'll begin with a look at a southbound hotshot led by a pair of Morrison Knudson's MPI remanufactured SD 40-2s. In 2 years of chasing around here, we've been snake bit on this bridge like no other location, and often have had to settle for local entertainment. Seems as though it's either nothing or, like today, these erstwhile hotshots are restricted to 5 miles per hour because there's a freshly fixed broken rail just north of here at Hankins. This day was that with the typically busy Sunday traffic having been stopped for 2 hours for the rail repair, it was a good time to hop over to the local grass airfield. I caught a ride with Robert Ballou in his Cessna 152, and we took off for a bird's eye view of CSX running some old Clinchfield rails. With all its bygone interchange traffic, Marion used to be the South End's version of St. Paul. But mega mergers have brought to a virtual standstill the trading of time freight with other railroads, such as this old southern line from Asheville to Salisbury, which crosses over the Clinchfield on a bridge right next to CSX's Marion Depot. While that interchange is pretty much a thing of the past, there's still an occasional roll of thunder on that bridge that is right out of the good old days. Even though the Southern and Clinchfield were cutthroat competitors, they used to trade time freight all day long over these three tracks. Not surprisingly, shifters were often a 24-hour item, and the railroad show at Marion was one of the best around. It's always nice when good shots are convenient and access is easy. Such is the case here south of Marion in the vicinity of Interstate 40. Each of these shots is within 5 minutes of the highway, and there are lots more. I'm sure it won't surprise you, but this place is called Mud Cut. And the road is Mud Cut Loop, which crosses the Clinchfield twice.
No defects. Total axles 370. Speed 020. Length 6562. CSX.
You can't be around the CSX too long before you become aware of another locomotive builder besides General Motors and General Electric. Back at the Catawba Viaduct, we just saw a pair of spiffy Motive Power International units that Morrison Knudsen built for itself to hold out for lease. The first 16 of those units were leased to CSX during the first half of 1990 and were regular visitors to the Blue Ridge subdivision. For this entire video, we've been running into GP30s, slugs from GP30s and GP35s, and several of 50 remanufactured ST40-2s, all which are MK products. Will Morrison Knudsen move up behind GE to become the #2 U.S. locomotive manufacturer? Or perhaps have they done so already?
You thought yesterday was warm? Well, it's another typical hot summer afternoon in thermal, 110 degrees, and no relief in sight for the next several days. But we didn't have any frost last winter. That's one thing to take in consideration. Hot? You betcha. And hot hits right here.
Few Clinchfield sidings are more out of the way than thermal. But the obvious truth is you can get here from there. And no, I don't know why they never have frost in thermal or why they named a college just south of here isothermal. Tell you the truth, I was never sure if I'd even found the city of thermal, and I've been here a lot. Gilmer Lane and the Clinchfield were born about the same time, and they've been plying their trades side by side ever since. While we waited for the next train, he shared about the problem in hiring teenagers to do farm labor, something most don't want to do these days, but which was a way of life not too long ago. In contrast, he felt the railroad never changed. It would always be there, and the Clinchfield was something you could always count on. Bostic Yard. This place is a real railroader sanctuary. I mean, it's not near any place except downtown Bostic, and it's normally real hot and drippy humid. But then, have they got some trains here? There's no maintenance facility or fuel docks, just lots of big diesels passing through, pulling long strings of revenue. There's even an interesting interchange here. Well, it used to be an interchange before the slow merging of all the alphabet forerunners of the CSX joined hands. Anyway, the Seaboard had a line from Hamlet through Charlotte to Forest City with a connection to the Clinchfield at Bostic. It's a pure CSX run today and is as active now as it used to be. You saw our reference to the Peavine line back by Interstate 40. That's the north end of an old southern line that ran from South Carolina to Shelby and through Forest City up to and ending at Marion, virtually parallel to the Clinchfield from Bostic north. The Peavine has been removed north of Gilkey and abandoned east of Blanton and Sandy Mush. But right here in the middle, the McGrady brothers, in an unusual short line union, have combined the tracks of Southern and the parallel Seaboard Air Line, including its run to Bostic, to develop a new short line called the Thermal Belt Railway. Running through the likes of Rutherfordton, Ruth, Spindale, Forest City, and on to Alexander Mills, the Thermal Belt Railway today handles plastics, pulpwood, sand, lumber, and grain with furniture loadings of future possibility. Old number one here is really old. How about a 1938 EMC SW switch engine? Its original Winton 201A prime mover was, in recent years, replaced with a Cummins 600 horsepower diesel that gives Thermal Belt number one not only the sound of a bulldozer, but a flap stack to match. Oh yes, that's Don doing the driving and Mickey doing all the hard work. At 159 feet high, it is 8 feet short of being Clinchfield's tallest. But at 1,360 feet in length, the Broad River Bridge is by almost 300 feet the longest of several marvelous high-span bridges gracing this incredible railroad. The busiest rails on the south end. That's how one railroader described the activity at this plant belonging to international giant Hoist Celanese. You're watching the afternoon local switch about 20 cars from the bridge over Interstate 85. at Spartanburg Terminal, the south end of the old Clinchfield line. We'll look around the Evans Street Yard here for a few minutes and then drift on over to the infamous Spartanburg Tunnel for a few parting words. College-level graffiti, such as on the Cleveland Street Bridge, had been well known to local railroaders for years. But the latest academic creation on this brand new replacement bridge wins a prize not so much for its artful simplicity as for its bold pronouncement regarding the nearby college. How'd they do that? How'd they name a bridge for themselves? This local out of Greenville, South Carolina has just climbed the 1.7% grade from the Spartanburg Tunnel. The two light engines came up the old Piedmont and Northern tracks and left their cars down in the old Atlantic Coastline Yard just south of Spartanburg. They'll work just north of here in Beaumont Yard before heading back to their train. Spartanburg Tunnel. Nothing like a good old political hot potato to end this video. Oh, it's not very hot any longer, though I'm sure Norfolk Southern would be just as happy had it never been built. You see, for 50 years or so, the Southern would soak the Clinchfield. Every time the Clinchfield had a car, it needed to get over to the ACL tracks, which it did several times a day by the entire train load. Southern insisted on using its own engines and crew, and for many years fought in court, and every other which way it could, to stop Clinchfield's attempts to get a tunnel under Southern tracks approved. In June of 1963, after more than 10 years of the latest political and corporate wrangling, the Clinchfield opened its $2 million tunnel. The savings on transfer fees paid for the tunnel and the legal costs in a relatively short time. It's no wonder the Southern's opposition was so vigorous. Even though they lost this battle, Southern's spoils over the 50 years of war were, to say the least, quite lucrative. I'm sure many of you wondered if we'd ever get here, but this is the end, in fact, just a little past the end of the Clinchfield Railroad. As we depart the tunnel's south portal, it's time to wrap things up and thank all the wonderful people who have contributed to this video. I've said it before, but it's worth repeating that we couldn't do this stuff without some terrific people who are so willing to contribute their time and memories. Your stories have been heartwarming and humorous. Your tips on better railroading invaluable. You've made us feel welcome wherever we've gone, and your contributions have been magnanimous. My thanks for all of it. I look forward to seeing you up on the rails of the old quick-service short route railroad, the one and only Clinchfield. If you like the sound of one of those mammoth steam engines, or the roar of a mighty diesel locomotive, or maybe you prefer a comfy ride in a spiffy lounge car, or the smoke and branches high atop a steam tender, perhaps you like watching a long, slow train at night, or maybe you stay up real late with the owls for the 2 a.m. time freight, or is it possible you just like to croon with the moon? For the best in railroad videos, call American AltaVista toll-free. That's 1-800-767-6067. Keeping pace in the world of railroading is an ever-changing challenge. Would you like to take a ride up the steepest Class 1 railroad grade in the country? The more adventurous souls might like to go where no noticeable rails have been lately. If you like the name Clinchfield, you'll love coal country or a hotshot shooting the gap. If what you like is just good old American railroading brought to life on video, call American AltaVista on their toll-free line. That's 1-800-767-6067. For the best in railroad videos, call 1-800-767-6067.